Thank you, Marty and Justice Wynn. We appreciate you all. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NACM. NACM's 2019 mid-year theme is Advancing Courts Today to Meet the Challenges of Tomorrow. This theme in this conference will focus on current and new solution-based technology, programs, and services in today's courts, such as alternatives to incarceration, treatment for mental health challenges, substance abuse addiction, human trafficking, bail reform, immigration, and domestic violence, just to name a few. So we approach this conference in this theme with a four-prong approach that include but are not limited to utilizing technology to advance courts, improving access to the courts, improving the court's response to substance abuse and mental illness, and developing court leaders. To start off, our opening plenary speaker is Ms. Suzanne Vickberg. Ms. Vickberg is a social personality psychologist as well as an applied insights lead for Deloitte's Greenhouse Experience team. She uses business chemistry to help teams explore how their work is shaped by the mix of individuals who make up the team and the unique characteristics they each possess. A more detailed bio is on your conference app, so I encourage you to read it there. But without further ado, please help me welcome Ms. Vickberg. Thank you.
It's okay now? All right, great. Good morning. Let's see if we can get our slides to work. Yes. Anybody else have trouble getting here? Yeah, I flew from New Jersey. Turns out you can't get here direct from New Jersey. So I flew to Chicago last night, and then I got there and they said, your flight's canceled. There is no way to get to Little Rock. So I told them that I have to get to Little Rock, and ultimately they said, actually, there is one way you can go through Dallas. So I'm like 3 flights yesterday trying to get here, but I'm here. So speaking of hell, I want to start by asking you to think about hell. And by this I mean your workplace hell. What is the workplace environment that causes you to be miserable, causes suffering, and that you just really can't stand to be in? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe 4 different scenarios. And I'm going to ask you to think about, as I'm talking, which of them is closest to your own personal definition of workplace hell. And I'm going to ask you to choose one. Okay? So as I'm going through, try to decide which one is yours. I think I have to point this, then it works. Okay. So the first one, if you can't see the picture there, it's a car behind a bunch of sheep on a road. And the word here is obstruction. And you can think about a workplace scenario where you're trying to get something done, but there's always something in your way. And that something in your way might be bureaucracy, red tape, a lack of funding, other people often. Maybe in this workplace, people talk a lot, but they don't make a lot of decisions. Maybe your goals aren't really clear, or they are, but you don't have any way to measure your progress against them. And generally speaking, you're just not able to accomplish what you want to. So that's scenario A. There we go. Scenario B, you see a bunch of birds on some wires there, and then one little bird in the corner by itself. This scenario is isolation. So imagine a workplace where you don't have really an opportunity to collaborate with other people, or maybe it's a sense of every person for themselves. People aren't really working together. They don't have each other's backs. Maybe there is little opportunity to connect or to get to know other people, and people are just sort of working on their own for their own benefit. Scenario C, you see a cloud in a cage. This is constraint. So in this workplace, creativity is not particularly valued. There might be a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, a lot of structure, a lot of process, and you're not welcome to break the rules or even bend the rules. There's a right way to do everything. You have to do it that way. Maybe you are told when you have to work, where you have to work, how you have to work, and you're feeling like you're just trying to have a little bit of flexibility, but that's not really okay in this work environment. Oh, did I do that or did you guys do that? Okay, scenario D, chaos. You see a boat on some waves here. This is a work environment where the direction is changing all the time. Things are moving very fast. Maybe there's a lot of people working in person in a very frenetic pace. Maybe you don't have an opportunity to prepare before you're asked to speak to an issue or to make a decision. You can't conduct the due diligence that you might want to conduct, and everything is just feeling really chaotic. All right, so 4 scenarios. Everybody have one in mind that fits their definition of workplace hell? What I'm going to ask you to do is turn to someone at your table and tell them about it. Now, if you're at a table by yourself, you're eventually going to need to move anyway, because I'm going to be asking you to be in tables of at least 6. So why don't you do that now? If you're alone or you're at a small table, try to join, because we're going to be doing an exercise a little bit later that I think you'll appreciate the strength in numbers and not want to do it on your own. So turn to one person at your table, or if there's an odd number, tell them which one you chose and why. Okay. Everybody have a chance to talk to someone? All right. So by raising your hand, why don't you How many of you chose a different scenario than the person you were talking to? It's very hard for me to see you. Okay, so how many of you chose the same one as the person you were talking to? Okay, so we have more different than we do the same. All right, how many of you chose A, obstruction? A lot of those. Okay, B, isolation. Only a few, isolation. Okay, C, constraint. And D, chaos. All right, so I think obstruction won, and maybe chaos is second. All right. So probably you thought we were here to talk about business chemistry, not workplace hell. And we are. But the point of this is that we don't all thrive in the same work environments. And in fact, the type of work environment that you thrive in might be the very definition of workplace hell for somebody else that you're working with. And so this is really what business chemistry is about. It's about understanding our differences and what are the preferences that we have for how we like to communicate or interact with other people or make decisions, and how those preferences can be very different from the people that we're working with. And sometimes that can feel like a real obstacle. You know, we have conflict with people, we're not able to get things done, we don't understand why they can't understand us. But with business chemistry, by learning what those differences are and then learning how to work across them, we can actually turn them into a strength once we understand them a little better. So that's what we're here to talk about. You do all have a book I hope you got when you came in. So in an hour, we can cover only a little bit. There will be a breakout where we'll dive a little deeper afterward for those of you who want to join that. But then, of course, you have the book, so you can get all the details. All right, so what I would like to do is share with you in 3 parts. One is to understand what are the 4 business chemistry types, to think about what your own type probably is, and then move on to trying to understand how you can identify someone else's type, someone that you work with or that you are going to be working with. And then thirdly, how do you adapt your style to the people you work with? And actually the team chemistry part will focus on more in the breakout. Okay? So hopefully you're in a cooperative mood. Because I'm not going to just stand up here and talk to you for an hour. I'm going to have you hopefully participating in some things. But first, I want to make sure everybody's got a good understanding of what the 4 business chemistry types are. And again now, while I'm going through these, if you could help me go, there we go. While I'm going through these, I'm going to ask you to think about which of these 4 types might best represent you. Also on your table, you've got these little brochures that fold out. They list some of the same traits I'll be talking about. They have the 4 types, so it can help you pick and understand which type is probably yours. So we're going to look at bigger versions of these slides, but are we? Do I have bigger versions? Let's see. Well, yes. Okay. So the first is pioneer. Pioneers are very adaptable. They're very spontaneous. They tend to embrace risk. They're outgoing. You can see by the squiggly line that's connecting these traits, that's sort of how a pioneer thinks. It's how a pioneer might talk when you're having a conversation with them. They tend to be very creative and very imaginative and open-minded. Okay, so that's the first type. The pioneer has an opposite type, which is the guardian. There we go. The guardian is very structured, detail-oriented, methodical. The guardian has a particular way that they like to get things done. They tend to be the most loyal of the 4 types, and they're very practical. So if you think about this really imaginative pioneer up here, the guardian's over here being very practical and trying to understand, well, what can actually work? And you'll also see on the left here, the guardian tends to be reserved. So whereas the pioneer is outgoing and extroverted, the guardian is more introverted and reserved. Then we have another opposite type pair, the driver, and then I'll show you the integrator in a moment. And drivers actually have two subtypes, which I'll tell you about, and so do integrators. But if we start in the middle here, drivers tend to be the most logical of the four types. They tend to focus on technical issues, and they tend to be most quantitative. But then the driver has two subtypes that fall along those lines of introversion and extroversion. The scientist is the more internally focused type of driver. They tend to be really curious, they're intellectual, they like to experiment. If you think of a scientist in a lab, this person might be this type of internally focused driver. Whereas on the other hand is the commander. This is the person that's like up in front of the room, leading the troops. They tend to be very focused, very competitive. You often know when there's a commander in the room, whereas a scientist might be a little bit harder to spot because they might be quieter and sort of focused on their own worlds. And then the fourth type is the integrator. And again, we're going to see two subtypes. But if you look in the middle, integrators are empathic. So they feel other people's emotions. They're diplomatic, and they value consensus. Now, the internally focused kind of integrator we call a dreamer. And they're particularly intrinsically motivated in that they're not really concerned about competing with others or comparing themselves to others. And they tend to be particularly non-confrontational, so they really don't want to be in anything that feels like a conflict. On the right side, we see the teamer, and they are particularly relationship focused. All integrators are, but they might have like a broader network, a lot more relationships that they're trying to manage, and they tend to be fairly traditional in part because traditions come from people. They're important to people. So for an integrator, they want to respect what's important to others. All right, and so these four types, I'll also just give you sort of a one-word summary for each of them as you're choosing which one you think might be you. Pioneer, the word for them would be possibilities, whereas for guardian, it would be stability. For the driver, it would be challenge, and for the integrator, it would be connection. All right, so choose one in your head that you think is closest to you. Now, we all have a little bit of all of these types in us. So it may be that you're like, well, I'm not sure, one or two. All of us have a primary and a secondary type, but might also have some traits of the others. So you just choose the one that you think is the best fit. And I'm going to ask you, this is where the cooperation part comes in that I mentioned. I'm going to ask you to show me your type with a pose. Are you willing to do that? I did this, by the way, at NAPCO. Who's familiar with NAPCO? Presiding judges, right? They all did it. So, all right, if you think you're a driver, and I'm going to ask you to hold your pose while the other types get into their pose, okay? If you think you're a driver, stand up and give me a power pose, like Wonder Woman with your hands on your hips and your feet planted apart. I know there's some drivers in this room. All right, so hold that pose. If you think you're an integrator, I want you to stand up and put your arms out like you're hugging the whole room. Those are connectors. Okay? If you think you're a pioneer, I want you to stand up and wave your arms in the air because pioneers really like attention. All right, and if you're a guardian, you can stay seated because guardians tend to be a little serious. And I'm not going to ask you to do anything. All right, thank you. You may sit down. So we have a good mix in here, right? All right. So thinking back to those hellish work scenarios we talked about a moment ago, if you think about what happens when you're chronically in a situation that feels like hell to you, where you're suffering, what happens? People tend to disengage, right? Maybe they're not giving their best effort. Maybe they're trying, but they're just not in a place where they can thrive. Or maybe you quit because you just can't stand it. Or maybe even worse, you stay and possibly even sabotage the situation. right? So we really don't want to be putting people in those kinds of situations. But here's how we can inadvertently be doing it. Right? How many of you have heard of the golden rule that you probably learned in kindergarten about treat other people the way that you want to be treated, right? All right, so imagine you are a guardian. I talked about the stability that guardians like. So you're a guardian and you're working with another person and you want to do the right thing and be really helpful to them. So you tell them exactly what the project is. You tell them exactly how to do it. You tell them when it needs to be done, where they need to do it, and how it needs to be done, right? Very, very clear. But what if the person you're working with is a pioneer? Remember the cloud in the cage, right? You've just created the exact wrong environment for that person to thrive. And you did it trying to be helpful, right? Because you thought this is what people want and need. Or say you're that pioneer and you create a situation where you give people lots of freedom, lots of flexibility. You figure they'll figure out how to do it. You give them a general idea of what the goal is and you let them loose. Well, if you're working with a guardian, you've now created an environment for them that they're not going to thrive in. Or let's say you're an integrator and you're giving some tough feedback. Okay, but because you're very concerned about how the other person is going to take the message, you're empathic, you feel their emotions, you want to be diplomatic. So you're very careful in how you deliver your message. But if you're working with with a driver, they just want to know what you're trying to tell them, right? They're wondering why you're wandering all over the place like this with the message when they wish you would just say what it is. Or if you're a driver and you go ahead and do that and you give very direct, very clear feedback to an integrator, they may feel that you're just being a little bit insensitive in the way that you deliver your message. Okay, so this is how we inadvertently create hell for other people by doing what works best for us. So the goal of business chemistry is to think not so much about yourself and what your type is, but to think about the person you're interacting with and what you think their type might be. And by doing that, then you can think about, well, how can I flex just a little bit in their direction, not become a different person, but maybe deliver that feedback in a more diplomatic way if you're a driver, or be just a little bit more clear about expectations if you're a pioneer. So in order to do that, you need to be able to identify someone's type, sometimes with not a lot of information. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do that next. Okay, we covered this. Remember those poses? Remember them. We're coming back to those in a minute, because I think you guys probably need some exercise. We started early, so you might not have gotten to the gym. Okay. Anyone here play poker? Of course not for money, but just for fun. So you may be familiar with the concept of a tell. A tell in poker is a behavior someone does that, especially if you play with them often, you begin to recognize that every time they, rub the back of their head, it means they have a good hand and they're trying to hide it. So trying to figure out someone's business chemistry type is sort of like identifying tells. There are certain behaviors, ways people interact in the workplace that could give you a clue as to what their type might be, and that's what you're looking for. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a process for how you can develop a hunch about someone's type. And I'm going to focus on the first 3 steps, so let me quickly cover the 4th and 5th. When doing this, you need to remember that what you're doing is just creating a hypothesis. You don't know who the person is. You don't know all their inner thoughts. You're inferring from their behavior what you think their type might be. And there's a few things to keep in mind. One, you could be wrong, right? Especially if you haven't interacted with them a lot. So it's a hypothesis. It's a starting point. Number 2, just because you identify me as a guardian doesn't mean, A, that I can't flex into like a really creative role if I need to, or it also doesn't mean that I have every trait that a guardian typically has. Okay, so just keep in mind, you're simplifying when you do this. And the reason you're simplifying is it helps you with a starting point in terms of how to interact with someone. Okay, but the fifth point is rinse and repeat. So this is something that if you work with someone a lot on an ongoing basis, you should be sort of refining your hunch, figuring out what works and what doesn't. In what ways are they like a pioneer, and in what ways might they be an exception to other pioneers? Okay. But when we're thinking about how to hunch someone, we start with what we call the unique traits. And just a little background on how business chemistry was derived. It was developed in Deloitte, and we came up with all the workplace behaviors we could think of that were important for how you interact with other people. And we mapped them in what you might call sort of a trait universe, right? So we did some statistical analyses, eigenanalysis if anyone cares, and it mapped our traits, and it identified which traits kind of hang together. You know, what are the things that if you're one thing, you tend to be another? And see those little constellations that are circled there? Those are traits that tended to hang together. So on the top right hand, you have the traits that are identified with our driver type, things like competitive and direct and experimental that we talked about a moment ago. Those were things that hung together, and in fact, they ended up being the opposite of what's on the bottom left, integrator traits like empathic and relationship-oriented. So if you were really competitive, you tended not to be as empathic. And that's how the types were derived. That's how we came up with them. And so you can see how we have these dimensions with two opposite sides. And so the first step in trying to figure out someone's type is simply to look at these traits, which sometimes are so obvious that you don't really need to go a lot further. You can see that the person is so relationship focused and so diplomatic and really doesn't like conflict, and probably they might be an integrator. Okay, but if you're not sure, as often we're not, there's a second step you can take, and this is what we call looking at shared traits. So that same trait universe, if you look a little more closely, one more, there we go. You see some other constellations here. These are traits that fell in between the two types. Okay, so there are some traits that pioneers and drivers share, and there are some types that drivers share with guardians. And this is another way to narrow it down, somebody's type, and I'll just show you really quickly. And these, again, are on that brochure that I have on your table there. You can start top to bottom and just ask yourself, is this a person who embraces risk, or are they more deliberate about how they go about it? Do they decide quickly, or are they going to decide a little more slowly while they consider lots of different areas? If you go through that, you're going to end up probably answering a few more either on the top or the bottom, and then you can flip and go side to side. Is this more of a relationship person or more of a spreadsheet type of person? Do they really love teamwork, or do they sort of prefer some time working alone? When you go side to side, then you can narrow it down even further. And this is a great way, if you want a little bit more structure, to think through what somebody's type might be. All right, so now we're going to do something that I suggest you never do outside of this room. And that is hunch somebody based on just one behavior. Okay? Usually you would try to get a sense of how they are acting in various scenarios, but we're just going to pretend that you just came into a meeting with a group of new people and you're trying to figure out what everybody's type is. Okay? And I'm going to ask you, oh, you know what? I'm going to need to go backwards. I don't know if that's going to work. Would you guys mind going back to that slide with all the poses? Yep, there you go. All right, so remember these? I'm going to ask you to indicate which type you think is going to do each behavior by getting out of your chair and doing these poses. Okay, this is your morning wake-up exercise, okay? So why don't you stand up, everybody, please, if you don't mind. I'll read the behavior and just do the pose that goes along with the type who would do this. Okay, who would be the most likely to request a detailed agenda or meeting process? Okay, so I see mostly guardian, few driver. So both guardians and drivers like to know kind of what's the deal, what are we doing? Guardians tend to be a little bit more focused on more detail, whereas drivers tend to like it a little shorter. All right, next one. Who's going to suggest that we go around the room and each person share their opinion? Yep, that's an integrator thing. Who's going to take charge of the meeting, like grab the phone or grab the pen or grab the whatever? Yep, I see both driver and pioneer, and in fact, sometimes they compete with each other to see who gets to be in charge. Who's going to propose just scrapping the agenda and changing the whole direction of the meeting? Yes, those pioneers, definitely. Who's going to say the least in your meeting? I see a few people thinking about drivers. So, yes, probably the guardian, if it's a group of new people particularly. Guardians tend to be reserved, particularly in new people. I saw a few people thinking about driver or integrator. We did talk about those more introverted subtypes, so it's possible that it might be one of them also. How about who's going to nod encouragingly, some of you have been doing me this favor, to the person who's talking in the front of the room? Yep, integrators tend to do that. Does that mean they agree? No. They might agree, but the nod doesn't mean that. Who is going to very vigorously argue for their point? Again, driver, maybe pioneer. Drivers tend to be the ones that are going to go head-to-head more. Pioneers might be a little less combative about it. Who's going to get out of their chair and wander around the room? Pioneers. They get bored. They're like, ugh. That's why I have to, the rest of you are suffering right now for the pioneers so that they don't get bored. Who's going to ask, oh, how was your journey into the meeting? And what'd you do over the weekend? And what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Yep. Integrators are they're gonna get a little bit more personal. They want to get to know you. Who's gonna suggest, let's postpone making a decision until we just have data about this? Usually that's the guardian, yep. Sometimes the drivers like data too, but they don't necessarily need as much of it. It's sort of like, give me the top 3 bullet points and I'll make a decision, whereas guardians want like spreadsheets. Okay, 2 more. Who's going to offer a technical explanation or solution to a problem? 2 lone drivers, 3, 4. Oh, now I've got some drivers. Might be a guardian. Drivers tend to be the most technical type, so it could be either. And who's going to suggest we hold a brainstorming session? Yep. Pioneer. All right, excellent. Thank you for the cooperation. Okay, I'm just doing a little time check. Okay. Could you forward for me? I think it'll be easier. Yeah, what's next? That looks like a great one to stop on. Okay. So I feel like you have a fairly good idea of the types. Is that correct? Okay, what we're going to do next is we're just going to do a little bit of an exercise to think through, well, how would I use this information? And this is something we'll, again, dig into a little more deeply in the breakout, but we're going to all do something fun here. And when I'm done with my instructions, I do think if you're not at a table of at least 6, you might want to join another table just for this exercise. But what I'm going to ask you to do is to think about how you would communicate with each of these types. And I'm going to give you a few clues here. But once I've done that, if you look on your table, there's a random object there. It might be like something like this. It might be like a little hook like this. So you might have to kind of look around. What you're going to do is create a pitch to sell that thing. We call this pick it, name it, sell it. Usually, if we didn't have so many tables and if I didn't have to come all the way from New Jersey with my heavy suitcase, you'd have more items on your table. You just have one. So there's no pick it. But you need to name it and sell it. Okay, that's going to be the goal. But the pitch you're going to create is going to be designed for one specific type. And as you can imagine from the descriptions we've just done, the way you would sell something to a pioneer is very different from the way you would sell it to a guardian. Okay, so that's the point of what we're doing here. And so I'll give you the specific instructions in a moment. But first, just think through these as you're thinking about how to create a pitch for the type that you're assigned. If you're pitching to a pioneer, they tend to like things that are visual, something that's intriguing, you know, maybe like that catches their interest. Okay. All right. I'm up on the stage. It's you guys I'm worried about with the flood. Okay, and they might like something in person a little bit more. I'll tell you. So I'm a guardian, right? So I'm that real detailed, focused person. And I tend toward, anybody here ever write emails? Well, I tend toward long emails because I want to make sure that I get all the points in there, right? And I want to make sure that I haven't missed anything, and I want to anticipate any possible question that you might have. So when I'm writing you an email, there's going to be a whole lot of text. And I might put a few attachments there just to make sure that I've got all the bases covered. The problem is my boss is a pioneer. So guess what she does with my emails? Nothing. She doesn't even read them. Like, I like to think that she means to read them, that she thinks she'll come back to them later, but it's very ineffective for me to send an email in my style to her. Because I'm sending an email for a reason, right? Like, I probably need something. Like, I need her to make a decision or to review something or to answer a question. But I don't get what I need because I'm writing it in my style, not hers. All right? So that email that I write probably works for another guardian. Like, it's very clear, it's very detailed, it's in writing, they know exactly what they need to know. Doesn't work so well for the pioneer. For the driver, I'm a little closer, except it's too long. Like, they want to know, as I said earlier, like my top 3 bullet points, and they would like to have the punchline in the first line instead of at the end, which is where I prefer to put it. Like, I'm revealing a really interesting story as I go along, and then when you get to the end, you get to know what it was all about. That doesn't work for a driver. They tend like things very direct, very logical, and succinct. And with an integrator, they tend to like something a little more personal, so I got to make sure I have a greeting up top that's going to, you know, make them realize that I realize it's actually a human being at the other end of that email. Some diplomacy is appreciated, and then context. Integrators like context. So in that way, my long email, if I use the right tone, might kind of work for them. They like to know, well, how does this fit in with all of the other things we're doing and talking about? Okay, so these are some things to think about in terms of communicating with the types. Now, the other thing you have on your table, besides the object, is two, we've got a little bit of a hodgepodge, but 2 indicators of different types. So on some tables, there are these bumper stickers, and you'll see in the corner, integrator, driver, guardian. In some cases, we've got these cards, and if you're at really one of these special tables, you have a handwritten paper, because we ran out. There's a lot of tables here. And there's 2 of them. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment, don't move yet, is to split your table in half. This is why I want you to be at a table of at least 6. So So you have a team of 3 or 4 people, 5, whatever, it doesn't matter if you're joining with another table. And pick up one of those bumper stickers, and half of you are going to create a pitch to sell that item to, for example, a Pioneer. And if you have Pioneer at your table, the other half is Guardian. Are you with me so far? You're going to create a pitch for the type that you're assigned or that you choose. And after I give you about 5 minutes to get it ready, you're going to deliver your pitch to the opposite side of your table. And I want you to be on the lookout for a really good pitch, because you can nominate the other team at your table to come up here and do it on stage. We're going to need one of each type. Okay? So is it clear what you're doing? You're developing a pitch. I'll tell you when it's time to stop prepping and to deliver it. And then you'll switch, and the other side will deliver. Okay? So take about 5 minutes to develop, and I'll come around if you have questions. Okay, everybody prepare. If you haven't started yet now, deliver your pitch to the other side and then switch and be listening for what do you think in that pitch is designed for the type that the group is pitching to. And be looking for a really good one because then I'll ask you to nominate your other team. Okay, go ahead. It's not. Oh, there I am. Did everyone deliver their pitch? Yes. Okay. So now, as a guardian, let me say I don't believe in forcing anyone up onto the stage. Okay? So if you really don't want to do it and somebody nominates you, you can say no, that's fine. But I'm looking, I can't get up that way. I'm looking for a team that did a really good pitch that was targeted to integrators. Does anybody want to nominate their table over there? Are you guys willing to come up here and do it? And we've got a mic for you. Wait, is that our mic? Where is it? Oh. But bring it up here so everybody can see you.
Oh, okay.
And everybody else, I want you to listen and channel your integrator, even if you're not an integrator. So you can think about what is it that you think they're doing that's targeted for integrators. And we'll have the other mic ready in case anybody wants to comment on what they've seen. All right, take it away.
Good morning. We are so pleased to be here this morning to talk with you about a new product that we have developed that we think will address some of your concerns. With me is my partner, Walter, who's going to talk a little bit about the product, its uses, and why we think it's beneficial to you.
So based on the feedback we've received over the last few meetings that we've had, we understand your concerns about people coming into conference rooms and having their coffee cups or water glasses mark up the tables. So listen to you guys, and understanding that you guys are very concerned about the damaging the furniture. We went back to our offices and we looked at different ways to solve that problem. So we came up with this little gizmo, which was made from recyclable products. This is a lot of wasted products. We have a lot of plastics that go on, into the waste fill. So,
by the way, it's named the Sticky Coaster.
So we looked at different ways of doing this. So we looked at an octopus and how it just sticks to everything. So we created this coaster that basically sticks to the table and to the bottom of your glass. So one of the things that we figured is if people put it on here, it won't move, so you won't damage your tables, right? Now, what we would like to do is to have you guys try this out for a little bit and give us your feedback on how it works and what you'd like to see to improve this. It's not the final, this is just a prototype, so your feedback is incredible for us and very needed so that we can improve this product.
One thing, Walter, I just want to impress that it is made from recycled materials and it is environmentally friendly.
So we're going to wait for you guys to test this out and let us know how we can better improve this product.
Thank you. Anybody have something specific that they saw in that was really good for integrators? Raise your hand. We've got a mic there, and you happen to be right there.
No, I'm not answering.
You're not answering. Anybody see something specific for integrators in that? Way
Over
up
here.
there.
The empathy that they used?
Yeah, empathy. For people, like we know you're concerned about the marks on the table. Empathy for the environment, emphasized repeatedly. What else? One more comment about this one. All right, we've got 5 minutes, so I'll make a comment. Two people presenting together and going back and forth, right? And it wasn't a hard sell, right? It was like, we want your feedback. We want to hear from you. That's great for integrators who really like to be able to contribute and to hear other people's opinions. Okay, quickly, anyone have a great pitch for a driver? Somebody did a good pitch for a driver, I'm sure. No? Yes? You'd rather not? There's got to... Come on, someone did a good pitch for a driver. All right, we'll come back to driver. How about for a guardian? Someone want to nominate their table mates? You guys over there were laughing like crazy. What did you do? Who were you pitching to? You can do it from there, but just stand up with the mic.
Okay. We're pitching to guardians today.
All right.
Behold, the cord controller. This is an easy-to-install cord controller where you can feed all of the unruly cords and disruptive cords on your desktop through this little hole, and it will bring them into an organized system. Don't panic. Hi, Rick. It comes in multiple colors so you can coordinate it with the system and the theme you already have on your desktop. It will not clash. And if you have any difficulty installing it or using it, it comes with a full 10-page instruction installation manual. And if you are still have questions, there is an online live question and answer customer service available at all times.
Excellent job, thank you. Right, so very Guardian-like. First of all, we're organizing all the chords, but there's a 10-page manual. You can get your questions answered at any time. Lots of details in that pitch. All right, how about a pitch for our pioneers? All right, well, maybe we'll do two. I saw another hand back there. Hold on.
Welcome, pioneers! We are here today to sell you the latest and greatest, the DA 2019! Give it up! This is the latest in desk accessories, brought to you for this NACM showcase just today and today only. This today is shown in the basic ivory. It comes in a multitude of colors. It is the ultimate in desk accessories. Use it as a paperweight. Put in your paper clips. Put in your pencils. Use it as a spyglass, a magnifying glass. The uses are endless. And what can it, what? Really? Bedazzled? No way. It can be bedazzled. And also engravable. Yes, not just engravable. It is also app-enabled. Yes, you see the barcode on there? You can connect it to your phone. It is Bluetooth enabled and has an accompanying app. The uses are endless. And today, for NACM, it's yours. How much? How much do you think it's going to be? What's that worth to you? $19.99? $18.99? $18.99? No. What? What do you want? What do you want? Come on. Free? For you. Yes. You get one. And you get one. And you get one.
Thank you guys. It's kind of hard to reclaim my stage. I thought they wouldn't. Thank you guys. I think we'll skip the drivers because nobody wants to follow that. I don't even know where the clicker is now. I've just got one final, so keep going. One more. All right. So obviously that was a fun and funny kind of exercise. The point, I'll remind you in case it's gotten lost, is to think about what other people's preferences are when you're trying to communicate with them, influence them, get them to make a decision, and to alter the way you do things to be a better match for them. As I've said, we'll focus a little bit more on teams in the breakout. But if you just think about going skydiving with a team, which type do you think might have suggested that happen? Probably the pioneer, right? Who's going to be the first one out of that plane or maybe pushing the person in front of them out? The driver. Who's going to check those parachutes and make sure that they're working? And who's going to suggest holding hands on the way down? The integrator. All right, thank you all. You've been great, and hopefully I'll see some of you at the breakout.
All right, well, thank you, Suzanne. And right now, we do have an opportunity for a networking break. We will break for 15 minutes, and then we will move into our breakout sessions. So enjoy the time and the rest of the day. And again, take this opportunity to start networking with those in attendance. Thank you.